The excitement of a new year, the new plans, the new goals, all the things we want to get done. But it may be important for us to remember Murphy's Law and perhaps take a look at making some realistic goals, setting some realistic targets. That's what this first episode of 2026 is all about.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 452 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. I should also welcome you to January 2026 and to the new year. And because it is the new year and I've been thinking about my own goals and you are probably thinking about your goals, I thought it would be a great refresher to take a look at setting realistic goals for the forthcoming year or whenever you happen to be listening to this, because it's not just about setting New Year's goals, it's setting ongoing goals and being flexible. Oh, rats, I'm giving away some of the tips I'm about to share in this solo episode, which will be coming up shortly after a few bumpers and introductory matter. All right, over to some comments from recent episodes. For episode 451, Messages to Readers, Edwin Downward said over at starkreflections.ca, I think I need to listen to this one again. The candid way you explored how you got to where you are as a writer, all wrapped up in a promo package for publicists, is both intriguing and compelling in ways I have to explore further. Thank you so much for that, Edwin. I'm glad you got some benefit from it. Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to share those messages, for the publicists, etc. But I really honestly think, particularly in this realm where there's so much digital content created, not even by humans any longer, and we're not just competing with other talented writers, but we're also competing with some pretty sophisticated AI tools and marketing, etc. So that focus on your humanity, which again, I've been saying this for years, and I know Joanna Penn has been saying this for years, is doubling down on your humanity is a very important message, and that was part of what I wanted to share with you, and I'm glad that resonated with you. And over to a comment I received via email from Kathy Mack. Kathy Mack starts off the email with, I batch listen to your episodes when I'm driving, so I expect the next observation is outdated. Let me comment on that. Not at all, Kathy. The episode is new to you, and yeah, I understand batch listening. I do that myself as well. And yeah, the long drives, it can be really beneficial. But the episode is new to you, and thus your reflection is new, and it's worth listening to. I'm always going to fondly remember the slogan of Bayused Books from Sudbury, Ontario, where I grew up. And there's this stamp that they had put inside a lot of the books, the mass market paperbacks that I still own from purchasing there. And it basically said that a new book is a book you haven't read. And therefore, a new observation, a new episode, a new reflection is one you haven't yet shared. So I am so glad you took the time to share some thoughts on some backlist episodes. Because again, to anyone who listens to those backlist episodes, sometimes they're about very specific things in time, but there's usually often something beneficial we can learn from there. Kathy goes on to say, back in the last podcast of October 2025, you told the story of meeting a woman who was sure you and she had met before, though neither of you could remember where, until she realized she knew you from the podcast. It's a classic example of a parasocial relationship. And in the email, Kathy shared the an image of the Cambridge Word of the Year 2025. Parasocial, involving or relating to a connection that someone feels between themselves and a famous person they do not know, a character in a book, film, TV series, etc., or an artificial intelligence. Kathy goes on to say, congrats, you're famous enough to have inspired a parasocial connection. Thank you for that, Kathy. Interestingly, I hadn't actually heard that term before, but it's such an interesting thing. When I think about that, I think about how lucky I am that someone heard me, either from this podcast. Most people that I encounter at writers' conferences recognize my voice from Joanna Penn's The Creative Penn podcast, which has kind of like a bazillion times the audience that I have here. More people know Joe's podcast than know mine. So doesn't that make you guys feel really special to be part of this amazing exclusive community? So in any case, that when I think about something like parasocial, I think about how we as writers can infuse that in readers, in our fans, right? Where a character we've created, you feel like it feels like this is someone you know. I think about a character like Harry Bosch that Michael Connelly created in the novels, but even Titus Welliver's adaptation in the Amazon Bosch TV series, and how I feel like Bosch is a character I know. I feel his mantra, everybody counts or nobody counts, which means like when he's investigating a murder, it doesn't matter who the person is, whether they're, where they come from, what their background is, and it all relates back to he, as a child, having his mother taken away from him. She died, and he was raised at an orphanage, and his mother was a prostitute whose murder was not investigated. And, later in the series, he does dig into it and he finds out what happened. But remembering that ultimate connection that he had to, obviously his mother, meant that he wasn't going to make that same mistake that other people made, and everyone matters. And again, Bosch doesn't exist. He was created by Michael Connelly. But I've had this parasocial, thank you for that word, Kathy, I have this parasocial relationship with characters like Harry Bosch. I have a parasocial relationship with Peter Parker as well. And I've even infused that into my character Michael Andrews from my Canadian Werewolf series. Okay, Kathy goes on to say, also because I batch listen, I've noticed that in pretty much every episode for over a year now, you've verbally worried about the backlog of episodes waiting to be produced and posted. Have you considered hiring someone to edit a few of those? After all, you use a cover designer, editors, and a publicist, not because you can't do those jobs, but because someone who focuses on it full-time can do an equal or better job faster. Why not apply the same principle to editing your podcasts? It would only need to be up until you've had them produce enough midweek episodes that you're no longer stressing about catching up. After all, many people in the world can edit a podcast. Only Mark Leslie Lefebvre can write the next Canadian werewolf book. Kathy, that is an excellent point. And as I was putting together my notes, I wrote, excellent point, M- Mark's lame excuse. I'm going to offer my excuse. So the challenge, there are weeks like this where I'm doing a solo episode because I don't have time to do the editing, etc. But the editing of the podcast is so important to me. I need to listen in depth back to those interviews so I can benefit as much as possible from listening to the conversation that I had with the person I interviewed, so I can learn, I can reflect, and that's part of what this podcast is about. I suppose I could test working with someone, hiring someone to do some of the editing and maybe have them feed bullet points to me, but it almost feels like that would be me cheating. And now I understand you're saying that I do that just to get caught up with the backlog. I think part of the issue isn't, that is part of it. There are some weeks when I just don't have time to go through all of that process, which takes probably about 4 to 6 hours in total for me. Whereas doing an episode like this maybe takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And it still takes a couple hours because I don't want to just wing it. I do want to provide value. And that's not just providing value for you, it's providing value for me as well. So I think one of the challenges I ran into is I did a lot of interviews, right? There were some weeks where I did 4 or 5 interviews in a single week, knowing full well that there's only an episode per week that's coming out. So the challenge again is maybe batching some of my time to get caught up on some of those so I can, spit out a couple episodes per week. And again, I do feel like I would be cheating if I had somebody listen back to the interview and do that sort of editing or producing. But you know what? It's something I'm going to chew on, and I thank you for that. That's a great thought. I will consider what I might be able to do with that. Further than that, I think if I'm going to hire someone, maybe it's to take the videos and edit the videos so I can actually have more content from the same work that I did, expand my reach, just like I've been expanding my Stark Reflections via Substack and things like that. And speaking of Substack, I have been thinking a lot about shortcuts and cheating in today's world for writers, and I've been speculating and formulating some thoughts on that, which I'll probably share in a reflection, but also be sharing over that. Okay. The end of Kathy's note is, that's it from the East Coast. Here's hoping for joy, good health, and prosperity in 2026 for you and your family and all the Stark Reflections listeners. Thank you for that, Kathy. I wanted your greeting to your fellow listeners and the Stark Reflections community. I wanted that to be shared as well. So cool. Thank you for being part of that. And again, from Kathy and from myself, here is wishing you joy, good health, and prosperity in 2026. So that is it for comments. I'm going to roll the bumper and do a personal update. A burf is a brief personal update. So when my words jump on top of one another and they just blend, I'm going to do a personal update. I can't promise it's going to be brief. Why should I even bother pretending? And then we'll get into the main content for this episode. So a funny thing happened on the way this episode. Liz and I went out west a couple days after Christmas. We went out west to visit the kids. Her 3 girls live out there. One, her and her partner live in Vancouver, and then the other 2, live in Victoria. One of them solo, and the other one with her partner and their child, our grandchild, our beautiful, lovely grandchild. So it was so great to get to spend some time with them. And the plan was I was going to get some work done in the mornings, etc., bring my laptop, all the things. And of course, the best laid plans of mice and men. So what happened was in the morning when we were going to leave to get to the airport, I'm going to pack up my laptop. And there's a few things I do. So I pack a few extra things. Like I pack a mouse to travel with, because I'm still not good at using the little keypad flat pad thingy on my laptop. So the mouse is a lot easier, especially when I'm doing spreadsheets and stuff like that. And I do spreadsheet work for Draft2Digital. A lot of the reports that I run on the top sellers, etc., require manipulating spreadsheets. It's just so much easier to drag and drop things and select things with a mouse. And then I also have my portable hard drive because when I went to a new laptop about a year ago, or 9 months ago, whenever I did it, I just transferred stuff to a portable hard drive instead of moving all my files over from the other laptop. I thought that'd just be easier, so I usually take that with me when I'm working on stuff, because I wanted to work on some book stuff and I wanted to work on the podcast, etc. And all of those things are on that external drive, which, yes, I do also back up every month or 2. So I take care to pack all my paraphernalia into my laptop bag, and off we go to the airport, which is, over an hour drive. And as we're going to security and I'm going to take I have a headset on, I stuff things in my laptop bag, and I open my laptop bag and I go, well, I'll shove this in with where my laptop goes. And I go, well, this is where my laptop goes. this is not where my laptop went. And I realized I'd forgotten my laptop at home. And immediate panic set in because there's never a day where I don't really work, even when I'm on vacation and traveling to visit family and stuff like that. Sure, I work a lot, fewer hours, but I still love to get up super early and even maybe put in an hour or 2 hours of writing or work or whatever it is. And I panicked because I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I can't do these things on my phone. Sure, I can write. I have notepads. I can do that sort of writing, but some of the work that I'm doing, relies on the laptop. And so I thought, well, I can't do anything about that now, and I figured I would just roll with it. And I really impressed myself that I did some work on my phone. I let my colleagues at Drafted Digital know my situation, that I wasn't going to be able to get the top seller report done until I got back. And I didn't panic. I actually just went with the flow and did my best to relax. Now, I was still writing in my head, and I still made some notes for some nonfiction stuff I was working on, as well as for some books, novels I have in the works. But interestingly enough, we were supposed to get back. We were supposed to fly overnight. So we were going to leave the West Coast Pacific time. The flight was 10 p.m. And then that was from Victoria to Vancouver. And Victoria is on Vancouver Island, so it's off the mainland, west of Vancouver. The southwest, technically, but, west of Vancouver. And then from Vancouver, I think we had like a 45-minute layover from Vancouver to Toronto. And we were going to get into Toronto time, Eastern time, around 7 a.m. And that would give me the 30th to get some work done, as well as the 31st, and etc. There were some issues with some of the flights, like the one from Vancouver to Toronto, because of where it was coming from, and there were some delays, but we managed to get booked on a different flight for that. So, it started around 5 o'clock Pacific time, and then we decided to try to get to the airport early just to see what was going on. By the time we got there, the Vancouver to Toronto flight was fine, and so we're just sitting there, we're having a drink, we're having some food, and it's late. It's probably about half an hour before we're about to board. And so we're supposed to board a little after 10. It's maybe a little after 9:30. And we hear this announcement. We can't quite hear it because we're in the restaurant. And then the waiter comes up and he goes, well, where are you heading tonight? Because it was the last flight out of there, I believe. And we go, we're heading to Vancouver first, then Toronto. He goes, yeah, that announcement that just happened, that flight's been canceled because of fog. And so there we are, 10 o'clock at night, and panicking because we have a house sitter. That's one of the issues, right? The house sitter for our dog specifically. And so having suddenly being stuck there. And so we went to the counter, and it was like an hour-long wait to, in the lineup of figuring out what they're going to book us on. And we learned that the next flight out from Victoria to Vancouver, and there weren't a lot of flights available to get various places from there. It's a smaller airport. Was roughly at 6 p.m. the next day. And then that would mean then we'd still have to get from Vancouver to Toronto, etc. And so we ended up, I went on an app, found a nearby hotel, was able to go stay at the local Days Inn. They gave us a coupon for a taxi. And I said, while we were looking at stuff, I said, listen, why don't we worry about, you just cancel this flight's canceled. Just find us a flight from Vancouver to Toronto. We'll get to Vancouver ourselves another way, which is what he did. It was a lot easier. There's a lot more flights going out. He said the first flight I can get you on would be at 9 a.m. But I mean, because we said we would take the ferry, and that takes a few hours, and so there's no way we could get because the ferries had stopped running at that point. So there was no way we could get to Vancouver that early in the morning. He said the first flight I can get you on is around 1 o'clock in Vancouver, and I said, yeah, let's do that, and then that way we get to Toronto or 8 o'clock at night or something like that. And so that was the plan. We looked at the ferries. We realized we could take a 7 a.m. ferry, which would get us in, I think, at 8:30, a little after 8:30, to the mainland from Vancouver Island. And then, of course, it would take another hour or so taking a bus and a train up to the airport, in which case we'd get to the airport maybe 2 or 3 hours early for our flight, but that's fine. Vancouver Airport's big enough, plenty of things to do. And that's what we did. And we eventually got home after all was said and done, with the delay, a little bit of a delay on that flight, and even the bag taking forever to come. It was almost an hour waiting for the bag. We finally made it home at 10 minutes to midnight. So we made it back home 10 minutes before the stroke of midnight for the new year. So, not quite 24 hours behind where we were supposed to be, but late enough. And fortunately, our house sitter was able to stick around for most of the day, make sure that the animals were fed. And so Indy, our dog, was only alone. He loves people. That's why we need a house sitter. Indy was only alone for maybe 4 hours, which isn't too bad. It was like, hey, that's half of a work day. So, like when I'm away and Liz is at work, for example, because I'm mostly here, so he's never alone. But anyways, that was the end of a long, long sidetrack. And of course, it wasn't just a planes, trains, and automobiles moment for me. It was a ferries and trains and planes and shuttle buses and automobiles moment for me. But we made it back. But that did mean I wasn't able to get the writing done that I wanted to do, at least not to the extent I wanted to do, because I can type a lot faster than I can write by hand. And no, I have not yet mastered the art of dictation. Also, when Liz is sleeping in the hotel room, my keyboarding is a lot quieter than my vocalizing. So that would be something that would annoy the crap out of her. And yeah, I know. I guess I could have walked around, gone outside, because it was above freezing in Vancouver and Victoria, which is quite nice. But also, I had thought I might have some time to do some listening to some of the interviews and editing, and obviously I did not get that done. So that, again, sets me back. I've already talked about that in the update from Kathy, but we'll see what can be done, because next week I'm going to be driving to Pennsylvania. I'm going to be driving to Philadelphia, to Bubba Bash. I'm going there. I'm meeting up with my buddy Kevin Anderson, going to see the Rush tribute. I'm going to help him selling his Rush tie-in books as well, and I'm in one of them, the Anthology 2113, so I'll get to sign some of those as well, and that should be fun. But that means I'm going to be driving all day on Thursday on the 8th to get to just north of Philadelphia, which means I'll have to get this next episode out and produced sooner, so I can relax and enjoy myself when I'm at Bubba Bash. But anyways, so that's it for personal update. I want to roll into the content. So this content is based on, I did a video for Draft Digital on January 1st as part of their self-publishing insiders, and it was the top 10 tips of setting realistic expectations. And I thought I would take the notes I used to do that live video and sort of share, based on my notes and based on new reflections, just some thoughts on setting realistic goals. But I want to cushion this by saying that this isn't going to be the same content. It's going to be based on the same notes. It's going to be more of an abbreviated content, more focusing on dealing with plans when things go wrong, when Murphy's Law strikes. So I'll just quickly list the tips that I gave on that episode. I'll have a link to that episode, of course. It's a video, and it'll eventually be a podcast that you can check out. But I wanted to drill down on some of the very specifics from that and share my reflections on those and how it applies to me, so maybe you can see how this applies to you. And that is coming up right after this bumper. Okay, here are the 12 tips for setting realistic goals. So thinking about this as we are setting goals for either the new year or for whenever it is that you're making those goals and plans, here are some tips that should help you. Number one, audit your actual available time. So before you commit to any sort of word count or project goals or whatever it is, it's really important to track how you actually genuinely spend your time, and do this maybe for a week or two so you can get a better understanding of it. Most writers will dramatically overestimate their available writing hours. So you have to be honest about your commitments that you have to work, family, to your health, to your personal well-being, and to the 1,000 other obligations that either are already on your plate or randomly surprise end up on your plate that can eat into your creative time. So make sure you do an audit of your time as even before you start setting those goals. And then 2, start from where you are, not from where you wish that you were. So for example, if you have a goal that says, hey, I want to write 2,000 words a day, but let's say when you look at where you are, you've been writing an average of 200 words a day, for 2025. So committing to 2,000 is not going to work very well. This is sort of based on Atomic Habits. James Cleary is sustainable growth comes from incremental increases. Now, he even says, a 2% increase, but maybe a 5% or a 10% improvement over your previous or current output is a little bit ambitious, but it's also very achievable. Going from 200 words a day to 250 or 300 words a day, or even maybe 500 words a day, is probably a more achievable goal. And you want to set goals that you can actually achieve so you don't demotivate yourself by not achieving them. Number 3, this is huge. This is build in buffer time for life's interruptions, for Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It could be illness, it could be family emergencies, unexpected work demands, unexpected personal life demands. These aren't exceptions to the rule, they are the rule. So it's really important to build slack into your timeline. If you think it's going to take X amount of time to do something, you need to add more time to it. So if you think a project is going to take you 10 months, give yourself 12 months. If I think it's going to take me X amount of time to edit an episode of this podcast, I should give myself an extra hour or an extra 2 hours. If I don't end up using that buffer time, that's time I get back. So I pre-invest that extra buffer time in, and if I happen to finish the task, I can get to it faster. That's all the better. But it's better than not building in the buffer time and then having to deal with the consequences and go, oh, now where am I going to make up this time again? Because that again is wasted time in reorganizing things. Number 4, distinguish between output goals and input goals. So, I'm going to finish my novel in 2026 is an output goal, and it's dependent on so many variables, some of which we've already talked about. But a goal such as, I'm going to write for 45 minutes every morning before I go to work, is an input goal, and you can control the input goal. Finish my novel, output. Write X amount of time, on certain specific days or times, is an input goal. If you focus on the inputs, the outputs will follow. And so that's really important, right? It's something that's also measurable and smart and specific, which leads to number 5, make your goals specific and measurable, coming from, that SMART. Specific and measurable are the first 2 elements of setting SMART goals. So, for example, I want to write more in 2026. That's a wish. But I'm going to complete the first draft of my novel by the end of September, or September 31st. Is there a 31st in September? 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. So by September 30th. So September 31st. Don't make up fictional dates. Complete the first draft of my novel by September 30th is a goal. You can't measure, you can't evaluate vague intentions. I'm going to write more, but you can measure concrete targets, a specific date and a specific time. Or instead of write more as a wish, instead of completing the first draft of my novel, I'm going to dedicate half an hour 2 times a week on Tuesday and Thursday mornings to write. is very much more specifical. Yeah. And inventing words and inventing dates is just part of how we roll here at the Stark Reflections podcast. But thinking about that, instead of write more very specific dates and times of how much you're going to write. It doesn't matter what the word count is, but the fact that you spent or invested the time in the writing is at least measurable. So again, let's move on to number 6. Account for the unglamorous work. There's the idea of writing versus having written, and most people will never write a book. Most people who've never written a book think it's glamorous, and sometimes it can look glamorous from the outside, but like that iceberg, there's so much more under the surface that people don't see when they look at a finished book. But writing a book, as we know, involves way more than just sitting down and being a genius at the keyboard. It's way more than just drafting. There's revision, there's research, there's coordinating with editors and maybe beta readers, and then potentially there's the marketing and all the things you need to do to get the book published if you're doing it yourself, or the whole process of querying agents and editors for that manuscript if you're not self-publishing, if you're going with the traditional routes. And so these hours, these unglamorous hours, take a lot of time, and they're not really visible. And so it's really important for you to account for that in your goals. It's not just the writing, it's the research. It's not just the working with an editor and the back and forth there. It's the steps to publishing, etc. All right, number 7. Choosing one priority versus a half dozen priorities, for example, is probably a better way to go. The most successful efforts tend to come from focused effort, not from scattering your attention across numerous things. Also, when Murphy's Law hits, when things go wrong, because they will, when the timelines get corrupted, when by the time you've budgeted Tuesday morning to write for half an hour before you go into work, when that gets taken because a child is sick and suddenly you're taking care of that, as opposed to having that extra half hour of time. If you have one priority, when you look at when something comes up to mess up your plans, it's easier to say, well, what's the most important thing here? Well, A, this is the thing that's important. I have these other priorities. It's not that they're not important, but they're not as important. So you can decide what matters the most. Is it, for example, getting the first draft finished? Is it the time spent looking, researching, and querying agents? Is it getting the next book in the series done, or the character sketches that you need to do, or some of these elements of world building? You can, if that half an hour becomes 5 minutes, what can you get done in the 5 minutes that feeds that top goal first? So that can be an important element. And then the other thing, again, they all tie into one another. Creating systems rather than just targets. So a goal, maybe I want to write a book, right? So I'm going to write a book in 2026. That's my goal. But a system, and we're going to come back to that other example I used, is so every Tuesday and Thursday morning for half an hour before I go into work, I'm going to write. And I'm going to take that time to write. Or I'm going to stop in at a local coffee shop and I'm going to write there specifically. It's very specifically a system. So every Tuesday, every Thursday, I'm going to leave a half an hour early, stop in, do that writing at the coffee shop. Maybe because Tim Hortons here has a 20-minute limit, for example. Perfect. Order my coffee, sit there, get 20 minutes of writing done, and then I'm on my way. That's a system. It's not just a goal to write a book. It helps me. So it's kind of like that input versus output. So systems, the other important thing for a system is it removes the daily decision making and the willpower drain that happens, because this is what I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, for example. Now, number 9 is planning for motivational dips. So we set goals at the beginning of the year, and that January enthusiasm fades. I mean, by March, most resolutions are long forgotten and dusted and cobwebs on them, etc. Similar things happen when you start a new project. It's really exciting, but then that mid novel slump, the saggy middle, that reality sets in. Maybe there's unresolved plot items that can frustrate and haunt you. So plan for the dip. And building accountability structures can help, whether that's a friend, a writing group, a check-in partner, a regularly scheduled sprints that you do with a fellow writer, which really was very beneficial for me in November and December. Maybe those carry you through the inevitable slumps that are going to happen as well. But that's also where a structure, going back to point 8, a system and a structure can help you, because you're like, oh, this is what I do on this date. And even having, when Julie and I were doing our morning sprints at 10 a.m., for the days that I didn't have meetings at that time, it was kind of like, no, this is what we're doing for the next hour. We're going to do 2 20-minute writing sprints together and hold each other accountable for what we get done. And sometimes it was writing, and sometimes it was rewriting, sometimes it was editing, sometimes I even just did research. But I used that time because this is what I do. I work on my writing between 10 and 11, and that was a very beneficial thing for me. Okay, number 10, align the goals with the current season of your life. So again, because I was just with our granddaughter, I was paying attention to how my stepdaughter and son-in-law, so much of their day is based around their daughter's, 14-month-old daughter, based around 14 or 15 months now. Oh, wow. She's growing so fast. It's based around her schedule and when she's, her nap time, and when she needs to be fed, and when different things are going on. So they have to plan all of the things that they do, whether it's work-related or social-related, around her. So that's different than Liz and I, who don't have young children anymore. We have adult children. So that's one thing we don't need to worry about. But maybe you're caring for a young child. Maybe you're caring for aging parents. Maybe you're caring for a partner who is ill. Maybe you've got multiple jobs. So again, comparing myself to someone who has different priorities and they're in a different season of their life where different priorities are important, is really important. It's really important for me to honor where I am, right? So at a certain point in my life, just getting a short story done as opposed to a novel can be a gigantic triumph. So again, align your goals with your situation, with the season you're in, not with someone else's season and not with their situation, because it is different. Okay, number 11 is include learning and craft development in your plan. In your goals, it's really important that learning and developing and growing, progression, as I say in the 7 P's of publishing success, that's really important to include it. Because not every goal that you set is about producing words and content and pages and books. Maybe the goal is to take a course to learn more about dialogue, for example, or to learn, plotting, or to understand a genre you're interested in writing in. My goal then is I'm gonna read 2 or 3 books in this genre that I'm interested in, seeing if it's something I want to write as well. Or I'm gonna just focus on my story structure. Or I'm gonna focus on my dialogue for 1 hour every week. Or listen to, I highly recommend the Dialogue Doctor, Jeff Elkins, as well. I've learned so much by listening to Jeff on the podcast and the content that he produces as well. Listening to this podcast, I think, is potentially helping you with learning. I'm often reflecting on the business of writing and publishing, but I'm also reflecting on things that are related to craft. I would never dare call myself someone who teaches craft, but maybe I can be a motivator, a craft motivator. Maybe that's a new role that doesn't exist. I'm going to motivate you to learn about the craft from really good people who are good at it. Anyways, making sure that you've invested in developing and growing and learning as a writer about the business, about the craft, that should be an important part of your goals, but it's also something that can be somewhat measurable as well, right? In terms of completing a course or finishing and reading a book is something you can kind of reward yourself for having completed. And number 12, the final one, is build in regular review points, check-in points as well, right? So, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, but if you have a long goal, particularly, like setting these check-ins is really important, especially, so you have a plan. I'm going to get this book done in the next 12 months. Well, that probably, I would suggest that don't just think of it as a big giant chunk of work. Think of it in the small chunks. Okay, maybe you're not an outliner like me, but maybe you have an understanding that it's roughly going to be somewhere between 20 to 30 chapters. So that means if I look at this 12 months, when is the writing finishing the first draft? What does that mean per month? So at the end of the first month, how many chapters should I have written so far, roughly? That's why doing word count goals during NaNoWriMo can be really important. So daily, to get 50,000 words done in a month, you need to write X number of words per day. And so you can check in and say, well, I did it this day, but not this day. So you understand where you need to go to adjust your plan, to adjust your path. Without the check-ins, you can be off track, and so far off track that you don't have a way to come back. But doing regular check-ins allows you to make adjustments. And this is one of the most important elements of making plans and setting goals and being realistic, is recognizing you had a goal and a plan from getting from A to B, and you were going to do it by setting these structures up, by scheduling this time or whatever it is that worked well for you. But you're going to recognize that things happened and you weren't able to do certain things, or other things came up and your priorities shifted. So what was once goal number 1 is not goal number 1 anymore. That's goal number 3. Goal number 1 is now this new thing, and it's okay to change. It's okay to adjust the plans. It's okay to say, I thought I was going to get this novel done this year. It isn't going to happen. But what I am going to do is I'm going to, finish outlining it, or I'm going to get the first half of the book done because I needed to do all these other things, or whatever it was. Just remember, when you're flexible with yourself, when you're flexible with your goals, and doing check-ins is really important because stuff comes up all the time. That flexibility isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of your wisdom, of recognizing that you may be off track from where you wanted to go. So does that mean either adjusting the path you're on or adjusting the goal? Well, that's it for this episode of the Murphy's Law and dealing with plans and plans that can go awry and all the things that can happen to us. Hopefully that gave you an idea of some realistic plans, realistic goals. And here's hoping that your 2026 is fantastic. I want to thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I want to thank those who leave comments for episodes. I really enjoy hearing what you're reflecting on as you're listening to the podcast. I want to say a huge shout out to my patrons over at patreon.com/starkreflections, and a reminder that I will be posting some more of that content that I posted that was in the backlog for Substack, so that my patrons have full access to that content all the time, regardless of the time lapse of the 4-week backlog, etc. And I heard from a patron just recently who appreciated the thing I had shared about a year ago, because again, this goes back to Kathy's comment earlier, is that was new to them. They hadn't seen it before, or even if they saw it before, maybe they didn't really attend to it, but now it made sense, and now it was something that benefited them. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing that. So again, thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next episode, as always, and until then, here is wishing you great writing and some solid, realistic goals, along with your good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.